an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering A Wizard Alone by Diane Duane. Chapters 3 and some of 4. No, wait. Yeah, and some of 4. Pursuits and half of conversations. In these chapters, we have a weird foray into somebody's mind, into their mind palace, you might say, even. And it's like very, very creepy, also really cool, but it leans much more towards creepy. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Thank you very much to Tristen for commissioning this episode. I'm really glad, to get to continue this series because it was a real close thing there for a minute with the commissions. I don't know if I have any more. Let me take a look. I have 2 more, April 7th and 16th. So it'll be a little while, but they're there. And if you are interested in me finishing this book and you're able to commission an episode, you can go to Patreon, or no, you can go to unspoiledpodcast.com/shop and just choose a classic book episode. All right. So these chapters are really wild. I had said last episode that I was going to underread for certain sections because it was just awkward to divide up the chapters evenly. And I decided that I was going to break my rule because there are breaks within the chapters that it actually does kind of work to stop where I did. So there's, basically I read into chapter 4 up until the first break in the chapter, which is right after Nita makes Dairine's bed disappear, which is a pretty good bit. I really enjoyed that. But yeah, and also it was really odd because the audiobook is not actually broken up into proper chapters. It's like the 3rd chapter begins 2/3 of the way into what's labeled chapter 3. These books, I swear, it's bananas. Anyway, okay, let's get to the actual plot of the story. So we have an interesting thing with Kit. I had forgotten that this was an issue that with his sister. So he has 2 sisters, right? We have Carmela. And then he has an older sister who I think is not living at home anymore. And I'm trying to find her name here. And Helena is probably how you say her name. Helena had not accepted his wizardry right away. At first, when he told her that he was a wizard, she just sort of treated it like a joke, which you would. I mean, let's all be honest, guys. If you had a friend that told you straight up, hey, I just discovered that I have powers and I'm a wizard, you would laugh in their face or be very concerned or not know what to say, but all you know is that you don't believe them. Maybe I'm projecting here. Maybe not everybody would react that way, but I know I would, as much as I love reading about this stuff. So that's her initial reaction. And then once she sees him using magic, like just around the house the way that he does, then she begins to think that he's made a deal with the devil. And then once he's able to prove that it's no problem for him to go to church with all of them, she begins to like calm down, and she's still like not super happy about it, but it means that he's not actively in league with Satan. And so that's, that's an improvement, I guess. let's see, I'm trying to find, when Kit got Helena to understand that the lone power, no matter which costume it was wearing, was never going to be any friend of his, her moral concerns had died down into a kind of strange embarrassment, which was as hard to bear in its way as the accusations of being a dupe of ultimate evil. When she went away to college and didn't have to see what Kit was doing from day to day, their relationship got back to normal, if a rather long-distance kind of normal. What would it have been like if she'd stayed around, though? How would I have coped? It was a question he was glad not to have had to answer. And if that makes me chicken, fine, I'm chicken. I found this really interesting. We just haven't, when it came to them discovering their abilities, we were really in Nita's point of view most of the time. We've been in Nita's point of view for the majority of the book so far, really. We've occasionally been with Kit, but it feels much more like he's the side character, despite maybe Diane Duane's best efforts. I'm not entirely sure if she's trying to make a thing happen that doesn't, or if she is, doing exactly what she intends, and Nita is meant to be seen as the main character up until this point. But in any case, the fact that his sister, felt this way, we didn't really see any of that, I think that he mentions it to Nita one time, and knowing that his family goes to church and that they are Hispanic, I'm assuming they're Catholic, and something that goes along with Catholicism is a strong superstitious streak. Speaking purely from the standpoint of a half Hispanic, half white girl raised kind of away from the church, but with a father who was deeply religious and still had many superstitions. It's the strangest thing to see somebody dismiss certain things that are new age as being complete jokes and mumbo jumbo, but then sincerely believe other things that are just as poorly supported by evidence, and just really think that one thing is pure ridiculous and the other thing is absolutely just a known wisdom that we should all be aware of, and I can't believe you've never heard that. So the idea that his sister, and perhaps I think he said that his mother had a harder time as well, or maybe it was his dad, but one of his parents had a harder time than the other. But this makes a lot of sense to me, and he says something about what if they hadn't accepted it and I had to remove that memory, which is really upsetting to think about. But it's one of those things where I'm like, God, I wonder how many people out there who have had to come out to their families about any number of things, whether it be sexual orientation or just making a choice that their family doesn't agree with, all kinds of things that made their family suddenly view them totally differently. And they wish that they could go back and take it back, because it's so easy from the outside to say, well, it's better to know. And if they're not going to support you for who you actually are, then you're better off without them. It's really easy to say that, but they aren't your family, and people are in positions where they rely on family a lot of the time for staying alive. So then you have kids that get kicked out for things that, whether you agree or not, the whole point of being a parent is that it's your responsibility to raise your kid. And these homeless kids wind up in really bad situations because there's nowhere for them to go except the foster system, which is really dangerous in its way. So the whole idea of being able to take back a memory is it's one of those things that I could see it being highly questionable. It's interesting that it's allowed, because I would say that in this universe, the rules surrounding what you can do with magic are more stringent than any other magical universe that I have read about or watched. There's much more of a morality component to the work of wizardry in this, which I don't feel like I've really talked about very much, actually. It's a natural byproduct of the fact that whomever they are fighting is a manifestation of the lone one, who represents entropy and darkness and death. And so they're on the side of the angels in a very literal sense. And so, of course, that means that their magic would be tied to goodness. And there's a heavy reliance isn't the right word. Emphasis. There's a heavy emphasis on like personal credibility and integrity. And I find that really compelling. It's one of those things that in some ways I really like it because I feel like there's a sort of honesty required that is very valuable in and of itself due to how dangerous it is to lie to yourself and how could the magic tell? I assume it could. So that it's almost a sort of therapy, if that makes sense, because you have to so deeply investigate your own motives for doing anything that you do that it feels like you would be forced to have a self-realizing moment earlier than you would as an average person because you're not taught to interrogate your motivations a lot of the time the way that you eventually learn to do that as you get older, but hopefully, actually, I'm saying this like this is just a universal thing. It's absolutely not, but for the people that I hang with, it is. But this sounds like it's forcing you into a more adult position. Oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to say it that way. You know what I mean. It forces them to look at things from a more adult point of view because they will have lasting consequences with this magic in a way that's part of what's great about childhood is that very few things feel like they have lasting consequences. I was going to say have lasting, but that's not true. They just don't feel lasting to you. And so you feel a lot freer to make mistakes and just kind of wing it. So in some ways, I love the fact that the magic is hemmed in by these restrictions, that there are limitations or dangers to doing things that fall outside what's actually the right choice. And it's tough to know sometimes what the right choice is. And I will say that's the one thing in these books is that often the right choice can be fairly clear. But even so, there's so much like good dialogue about the rationalizing that can take place that I'm not even mad about it. So while I do like that, there is a part of me that feels like the fact that this magic is inherently limited by the user's desire to do good and their honesty with themselves, it means that there's not as much potential for... I shouldn't even say that. That's not really right. It feels like our friends aren't going to make that kind of mistake because they seem to really understand what the fallout could be from that, and they really believe it, which I think is key. I would like to see somebody who has gotten access to magic, hasn't fully completed their ordeal. For all I know, I could be describing this main character, Daryl, right now, but I don't know. But I would like to see somebody who maybe doesn't believe the morality clause about this magic. And because, at one point, Nita specifically tells Dairine, I don't believe you, say it in the speech. Because you can't lie in the speech or it's a really dangerous thing to do. And I don't remember if we've actually heard what happens if you lie in the speech. But the way it's talked about is more like it could go really wrong rather than it would go really wrong. It feels a lot more like it's super risky rather than it will absolutely, flipping a switch, it will explode all over you. And if it's risky and not just deadly, I would like to see somebody do it. I just kind of want to know what happens. And I would like to know what happens to a person who is given these abilities, who doesn't abide by what those are intended for. You just lose your magic, if I'm not mistaken, at the extreme end of a thing, right? I mean, you could die, certainly. That's a whole other, consequence. But I'm talking about strictly magical consequences rather than life and death. I believe that we have heard that you can just lose your magic. I feel like that's not enough. However, that's because I'm thinking in the way of an American who wants to penalize somebody rather than getting to the root of the cause of the problem, which is they have access to power that they are misusing and abusing. Take it away. And that really does sort of get to the fucking heart of the matter, doesn't it? If they can't be trusted with it, you just take it away from them. I wonder what it looks like to misuse and then lose your power. Is it possible to get it back because you really do internalize and learn your lesson? Because you genuinely see the consequences of what you did and what it could have done to other people and the ripple effects that it had, and you feel remorse and genuinely would never do it again? Or is that it? Do you get your one shot? Because let's not forget, these kids were, 12 when they got their magic? 11? They were children. And if they did something to lose their magic at that age, I feel one could hardly be surprised. I don't know if we're meant to think that getting your magic means that you are also blessed with like a higher understanding and a belief in the consequences that I rarely see displayed in 11-year-old children. Perhaps. But anyway, I'm sorry, I got so off on a tangent here. I haven't talked enough about the restrictions around magic in this world, because the magic often feels so secondary to so much else of what's going on, because these are really personal stories with like such a heavy emotional component most of the time that whether or not you even had the magic in certain areas of these stories, it would still be like a high impact tale. And so it's often not really even been at the forefront of my mind because I'm so much more interested in the characters and what they're going through. And I just felt like, I'm getting into the 4th book now. It's about time that we talk about this. So anyway, so Kit has this like interaction with his sister. There is one of my favorite things about reading this book on an ebook, and apologies to everybody. I am supposed to be completely boycotting Amazon this week, and I realized belatedly that I have this book on Kindle, and the previous show that I recorded on was Fleabag, which is only available on Amazon Prime. And I was like, I realized sorry, there's certain things that for work, there's just no other option. But this on Kindle has like, one of the features is it will show you sentences that have been highlighted by more than I think more than 20 people, triggers it so that you see a dotted line underneath it. And this indicates that this was something that a lot of people found notable enough to highlight, whether it be because it was very funny, because it was like profound in some way. And the one that was highlighted for here was the Lone Power's favorite tool, entropy, had already struck locally. His cornflakes had gone soggy. Which I just find, I don't know why I find it so funny that so many people highlighted that line. What a weird world we live in. Sometimes that'll happen. I'll see lines highlighted that I'm like, why did people think? And then, unfortunately, I've had highlights that give away something. Everybody highlights a thing, thousands of people on a series that's been out for a long time, and you're in book 1. Chances are 1,000 people highlighted a spoiler. So actually, I had turned this feature off for a while, and I probably should again. But anyway, so Kit, he's been thinking about this, and he goes and sees his pup, Paunch, who wants more extra food off of him because we are about to go hunting and I need to keep my strength up. He laughs at Paunch here, but once we actually see where they're going, it doesn't feel as silly anymore because that shit was strenuous. So He cleans his feet. If you're going to hunt, your feet have to be clean. Kit put on his jacket, picked up his house keys, and got one more thing from the place where the coats hung. The wizardry leash he'd made for Paunch when they were working together in other worlds. For those who could see it, it looked like a slender, smooth cord of blue light, a tight braid of words in the speech that had to do with finding things, remembering where you found them, and not losing what helped you find them in the first place, namely Paunch. I thought this was so... it's not often in these books that I think about the visual of their magic against the real world. I'll picture their magic sort of in a vacuum as they're doing it. But I never thought about making a leash out of wizardry and then just hanging it with all the other things that get hung up in the house. And how wild that would look. You've just got your coats, some scarves, your purse, keys, jacket, and then a blue wizard leash amongst it all, like it's nothing. I would find that very off-putting. I'm not going to lie. I wonder what happens if you make these and then if you made more than one, but they had different purposes and they got hung near each other and hit one another. Would it impact the magic at all or what? So let's see. Oh, okay, right. So here's a thing that I thought was fun. Kit uses this method to be invisible. I thought this was neat. This was one of the simpler ways to be invisible. The wizardry looked at what was behind you and made anyone in front of you see that instead of you. This light diversion type of invisibility wasn't good for use in large groups because it tended to break down under the strain of servicing too many viewpoints. But Kit thought this would be good enough for this morning. He didn't think he and Paunch were likely to wind up in a crowd. This is great. I love this whole idea. I love what she takes into account in terms of the weaknesses of a spell. Because it's really easy to make up something that's sort of foolproof, and that's not interesting. You need things to have weaknesses for there to be tension. So she gives us this really awesome concept for invisibility, and then she immediately is however, drawback, and it lays the groundwork for something that could go wrong later, which it does. So they go to the school building, and they see Daryl. And it's a weird thing where he seems to be sort of staring out into space, but he's smiling to himself a little bit. And when I first read this, I kind of thought, is he smiling because he's aware that Kit is here? And then I was like, he wasn't smiling last time Kit came and checked on him. And so why would that happen here? Let's see. I'm trying to find this thing. It didn't look like the classrooms at Kit's school. These kids had special needs. Daryl sat dressed in a t-shirt and jeans and sneakers again, his dark head bent over a large soft cover book. There he is, but still not there, Paunch said. Then where exactly? Kit flipped through the manual for yet another spell. This spell, too, Kit had prepared the night before, knitting both his and Paunch's names and descriptions into it. The wizardry included a variant of the Mason's word, which involves a very detailed description in wizardly terms of the structure of stone. As both wizards and physicists knew, no, even the densest stone is mostly empty space. Now, as Kit and Paunch walked toward the wall of the school, all the atoms in their bodies and the atoms of the wall engaged in a brief, complex, stately little dance, carefully avoiding one another in droves as wizard and dog passed through brick and mortar and reinforcing metal. A moment later, Kit and Paunch were standing inside the classroom. And the funny thing about this is that this is just sort of, an idea that's been out there for a while, that if you could control the space between atoms, then it would just, we could put things wherever we wanted to put them. This is also in I think A Wrinkle in Time is how Charles Wallace describes just walking through a wall. You just rearrange the atoms. It's no big deal. He's very disdainful about it. They made their way around the edge of the room toward the side where Daryl sat on the floor looking at the book. Or is he really? Kit thought. Daryl was looking in the general direction of the book, but not at it, more through it. His face was not quite expressionless. There was a shadow of a smile there, but it was hard to tell what he was smiling at. They paused near him while the teacher kept reading something about the 7 wonders of the ancient world. Ponch stood looking intently at Daryl, his nose working, while Kit looked over the boy's shoulder, trying to make something of that remote expression. And so I'm realizing now, do you guys know what all the 7 wonders are? Because I'm not sure that I know. Let me look them up. We've got the Great Pyramid of Giza, the Hanging Gardens of Babylon, the Colossus of Rhodes Memorial. Really? I don't really know that one. I'm going to open that. Lighthouse of Alexandria, the Temple of Artemis, Statue of Zeus at Olympus, and Mausoleum of Halicarnassus. Wow. Other than like Giza and Babylon, this is like a really Eurocentric bit, ain't it? Well, I guess what did I expect? The statue, the Colossus at Rhodes is like the statue in Bravos for Song of Ice and Fire. What? Or was it? So that's, it doesn't actually exist anymore. All of these that I'm seeing. Oh, that's, okay. So the reason that I went and checked this is because the description of where they wind up, I was wondering if there was like one of the 7 wonders that kind of like description wise would match up or explain why this place looks like it does. Now, just because it doesn't exactly match, it doesn't mean that there isn't some inspiration there that the author was drawing from. I don't know. Maybe the Hanging Gardens of Babylon was the thing, because that has a lot of pillars and whatnot, but I don't think so. She might have just been like, you know what? I'm going to make this sound like something from what I kept thinking of once we get to that description was the, not the Raiders of the Lost Ark, the other Indiana Jones movie where they wind up finding the cup, and there is this like temple built into a wall of red sandstone that is used in a lot of movie sets because it's just this incredibly striking building that looks like it was hollowed out from the rock, and I think it was, and also kind of looks like it's in like a secret. You know, it's got walls of stone around it that sort of shield it. And so when you're filming, it can look like it's something that was, you know, hidden by the sands of time. So that's what I kept imagining once we get to this place. So Ponch sits down and scratches himself, and everybody looks up because they can hear the sound of his tags. So that was something that I had forgotten, was the fact that, yeah, they're invisible, but they are still audible. So they still have to be quiet. And I love the fact that the teacher even gets up and walks toward them like, what the hell? When there's a sound in a room and you cannot discover what could have made that sound, I find that to be even more upsetting than seeing a flicker and thinking something was there. I can have my eyes tricked all day long. I see flickers and shadows at the drop of a hat. My eyes aren't great. There's after images from light. I will easily believe that something was a trick of the light, but I can't do that to my brain. I can't trick myself into thinking I didn't hear what I heard. Like, that is a much harder thing. There's occasional exceptions where I'll be like, okay, maybe it was just the cat. But like, you know what sounds your cat makes. That's not one of them. There's no explanation for that. So the wind hit them so that Kit staggered, staring around him, half blinded by the sudden blazing light after the soft fluorescence of the classroom. So they're in his mind, and this is like, it's a sandstorm, essentially. And it is uncomfortable. And Kit really is moved to have like deep sympathy for this kid based on several things that he encounters, obviously. But at this point, just the pure sandstorm, this is like bumming him out big time. He just can't believe how much this hurts after such a short time. And he's wondering how this kid is putting up with it, you know, living like this, basically. He asks whether or not the autism made this, or if he made it. And this is one of those things where I can't speak for a community, but I would feel a bit of a way having my diagnosis separated from me in a sentence like that. You know, being like, did Natasha build this or did her depression? I know that sometimes it can be easier for us to distance ourselves from our bad thoughts by being like, that's not actually who you are. That's an evil illness in your head telling you lies. And that's completely legit. But that's an internal like coping mechanism versus somebody telling themselves or another person that the depression isn't part of who you are. Because unfortunately, it's both. You know, it's like I can acknowledge that it's an illness that wants to kill me and it lives in me and I have to just deal with that all day. I have to deal with that. So it's separate, but it's there forever. It's not ever going to be gone. So it's also a part of me. And so this whole like, did his autism make it or did he? I think what the intention is here is to be like, is this something that he created due to his free will? Or is this something that his illness has caused to happen? But also I hesitate to call autism even an illness exactly, because I don't feel like that's correct. But yeah, anyway, I just wanted to mention that because that tripped me up for a second. And I was like, I don't know how I feel about this. So Ponch can see there are footsteps in the sand. And he's like, okay, this kid is actually here. He's going away from the other one. Can't you feel it? It's here too. It's following him. It's been following him for a long time. And Kit says 3 months because that's how long Daryl's been on his ordeal. And Ponch says, I think longer. And that made me wonder, is that meant to be like the lone one is behind the autism? That's a little bit worrisome. I guess we'll see. When Ponch says, I don't know, but its scent is strong in Daryl's neighborhood. I've smelled it often enough when it's been chasing after you. He flees, it pursues, and not just here. So they follow this trail. And this is when Kit is just like, God, this is so miserable. Once or twice, Ponch was certain enough of the trail to let Kit use a transit spell to cover some distance. But more often, he insisted on doing it on foot, so Kit simply had to slog after him. And he asks whether it's real, and Ponch basically gives the standard, like, magical answer of it's real to him. So that means it's real. Like, that's all it is. Reality is just subjective to who believes in it. Kit asks, what if it doesn't want to just concentrate on him? What am I supposed to do if it decides to try to do something about me? Just cut and run? Just leave him there? I wish Neats were here. I could really use some backup. This is one of the first times in a minute that Kit has just been like, I genuinely wish she was around. Because the beginning of this chapter, or this book, he has the phone call with her, and it's like genuinely a bit of a chore because he doesn't know what to say to her. And he feels really awkward and guilty for feeling awkward. And it's just a bad place, man. So, here's the description. The whole side of the cliff was a dark red stone carved deeply for at least 300 feet up. The red stone must have been the source of the pink tint in all the sand. Someone had carved the cliff into pillars and arches, galleries and balconies, reaching back into solid stone that looked as if it had been laboriously hollowed out, chip by chip, by truly obsessive artisans. Niches and pedestals were carved into the stone. In them and on them stood statues of people and animals and creatures not native to Earth, some of them not native to any planet Kit knew. Some of the poses, some of the expressions, were very creepy. Indeed, all the statues, human or not, were staring down at the space in front of the oblong opening with stone blind eyes, staring at Kit as if, stone or not, they could still see. And it all looked brand new, as if whatever or whoever had done this work might still be there, somewhere inside the gigantic gateway that loomed dark and empty in front of Kit and Paunch right now. It wasn't an idea that made Kit particularly happy. I don't blame you, buddy. That sounds really creepy. And I'm really interested to see whether or not, because once we get to the end of this, it feels like Daryl has more of a handle on things than Kit expected. More than maybe I expected. It's hard to say, because the fact that he's been on this ordeal for so long, it's, interesting that Paunch says that he could smell the Lone One from before the ordeal started. So maybe that has something to do with it, that it's being drawn out because maybe Daryl doesn't realize it's an ordeal because he's been dealing with this thing forever. And so he doesn't see this as a particularly new situation. I don't know. Is all of the battle taking place in his mind? And that's why externally it seems like he's not engaging with the world around him, because in his mind, he's fucking preoccupied, and that might be what caused, because I believe they said that he had been diagnosed this whole time, but it had never been quite as debilitating as it was recently. If I'm not mistaken, you guys can correct me on that. So that might explain it. He begins to become more engaged internally. And so it manifests externally as a worsening of, this disability. So let's see. The way he was walking made Kit almost feel like laughing a little, even through his nervousness. It was the way Paunch stalked squirrels out in the backyard, stealthy, a little stiff-legged. That's all we need in here, he thought, as he followed Paunch into the dimness, to be attacked by millions of evil squirrels. I have to admit, when I read that, I was like, I don't need you even thinking that, dude, because for all we know, that shit's going to manifest out of nowhere, because we don't know what this place is like or what it does. So, let's see. No light source showed, but a soft white light nonetheless fell on what he pointed his finger at. In this case, another immense carving set into the wall to their left. Kit took one look at it and immediately turned the light elsewhere, reminded much too clearly of the alien with the laser egg beater. The carving could have been one of that alien's relatives in a very bad mood, and it seemed to be looking right at him, not only with all its eyes, but also with all its teeth. Okay. So when I said earlier it seemed like he had a better handle on things than Kit had expected, what I'm saying is, here's my theory. This building is made out of things this kid has dealt with in his life. Whether that's metaphorically or literally, it feels like these are all, like he's doing the white witch's deal of turning things into stone, and that might be why he's in the midst of like an amphitheater of them. Like there's just so many that he has fought in his life, and maybe that's why it looks like it's going back further, or these are the ones that like attacked him first. I don't know how they get put into like, a beautiful setup like they're a temple, but I'm just throwing it out there. I have no idea. So There was no dismissing this space as just a cave. It was a long hall, a vast corridor of a dwelling of some kind, as intricately carved inside as it had been outside, as if thousands of creatures with the passion for strange statuary had been working here for centuries. Where the walls were lacking actual statues, they were wrought in weird but wonderful bas-relief, vividly colored, touched here and there with the glint of gold or the glassy sheen of gems. Kit moved past them in a mixture of nervousness and admiration, his light flicking past stern creatures with vast, spread wings, tall, rigid humanoid shapes with arms held in positions ungainly but still somehow expressive, strange beasts' shapes whose expressions were peculiarly more human than those of the man shapes that alternated with them. The place made Kit think of the set of some kind of adventure movie about exploring ancient tombs, but realized in 100 times more detail. Every chisel mark accounted for. I'm wondering if that is meant to be a reference to the Indiana Jones thing it's reminding me of. Every chisel mark accounted for, the backs of the statues as perfectly executed as their fronts, everything so sharp and clear down to the last grain of sand or dust. So this is part of why I'm thinking that it might be actual creatures, because of the fact that they are so detailed. Absolutely every detail is seen to. And also, this like incredibly detailed, focused, I use the word focused because that's what keeps being mentioned about who would have made this. Obsessive carvers and artists, right? I can't help but think this is made by the more under control part of Daryl's mind, and the sandstorm is meant to represent the confusion that often is like shown externally. So there's like this sort of calm center that is where things make sense and he's like handling things, but it's surrounded by a sort of maelstrom that can be tough to penetrate. Anyway, so his light flicking past stern creatures with vast spread wings, what else might be going on inside of Daryl? He could see things more clearly than Kit had ever seen them, except under the most unusual circumstances. If that was any kind of hint to what Daryl's talents as a wizard might eventually become. So, at this point, Paunch stops and growls. And Kit begins to see these little shapes that are moving out of the light. And he keeps hearing like wings flapping. And it's all out of sight. He can get the edge of it with his light, but they move and they just keep... And he said that he's reminded of cockroaches, which is incredibly unnerving. Cockroaches are like so upsetting in the best of times, and I don't want to imagine them in my mind, even though that's a really good metaphor for like intrusive thoughts. Even when he tried to look straight at them, they stayed vague, like the things you see or half suspect you see out of the corner of your eye, the things that creep up on you from behind in the dark. Point the light at them and they're gone, flitting to either side, but let the light slide away, and they gather there again, seen better by averted vision than straight on. This is actually true, like in not talking even about fear. I take walks at night. I tend to only do that with Owen now, but that is a thing that'll happen with things that are sort of more light colored, like if there's a big stone on the side of the road, or trash sometimes will blow out of a garbage can and there'll be like a piece of paper up against a tree trunk. And if it's dark enough, I can see it out of the corner of my eye, and I immediately am like, oh, that's a piece of paper, and I can tell. But when I turn to straight on look at it, I could barely make out the edges of it. It's a bizarre thing. And I'm sure that is also like linked to the fact that I just don't have great vision. But I just find that like very unnerving when it happens, that turning to look straight at it means that I see it less clearly. Like, how is that fair? So they crowd closer, and Paunch like bares his teeth and growls, and that makes them skitter away, but they're definitely still there. He was trying to tell if whatever avatar the lone power was using here was particularly close by. It seemed to him that it wasn't, that its attention was elsewhere, closely centered on someone else. So they come out from the hallway. Let's see. And, they come out into a narrower hallway. That's right. I thought that this was the point when they come out into the giant sort of amphitheater thing, or Coliseum Amphitheater, right? And this is the part where Kit's like, I swear to God that these walls are closing in on us. Like, I know that's not happening, but also I don't know that it's not happening. And every time that I look away, I really think that's definitely what's happening. And that is a fucking mood. That got me. So here is when he comes out. Let's see. Kit stopped at another of those earth-shaking, wall-shaking rumbles of noise, louder than ever, and the hair on the back of his neck stood up because he could sense the lone power nearby. "You stick close to me from here on," he said to Ponch. "All we have to do now is figure out what's going on and what to do about it." "Let me know when you do that," Ponch said, "because right after that, I want to go home." And I found that really surprising because I feel like Ponch has been the one wanting to explore things in the past. So for him to be the one that's like, you know what? I've been done. Let's be home now, please. That feels like a real fucking waving red flag. I don't care for that. So they go through, and there is this light at the center of rings and rings of these creatures. An amphitheater, its upper walls crowded with more of the creepy blind-eyed statues. Their gazes turned down towards the central stage, watching, though seeming not to. In the stands of the amphitheater were hundreds of the shadows that Kit had seen in the outer darkness, maybe even thousands of them, all as intent as the statues on what was happening down in the space in the middle. The fury of light concentrated there should have washed all those shadows away to nothing. The center of the amphitheater was crowded with writhing whips of lightning, ropes and sheets of lightning, whole curtains of it, such as Kit hadn't seen since he was last deep in the atmosphere of Jupiter. All of the deadly fire was striking at one spot, washing over it again and again as if trying to obliterate the single small shape that stood alone in the middle of it all, arms up around his head, twisting from side to side. With every crack of lightning, the air was torn with the great havoc of thunder, a shattering drum roll that never stopped. Ponch, peering around the door and squinting into the lightning, crowded close to Kit, growling softly, and Kit hung on to him as though together they peered down into the heart of that riot of fire and destruction, trying to make out what was happening. So, this is when he realizes that it is the lone power looking down on the sort of like avatar of Daryl, I guess is the best way to say that he is attacking with lightning. And the kid is trying to fight him off. And at first, Kit is immediately like, what the fuck? I have to do something. But then Ponch cuts in and stops him and says, he's not here. What? Kit said. Daryl, he's not here. But you said he wasn't in school either. The scent's changed. Watch. Kit shook his head, got up, looked around the door again. There was the small dark shape crouching in the center of that huge lightning-scarred space, rocking, hiding its head in its arms, while the lone power scourged it with lightnings and laughed, the hissing of the watching fears a soft, evil accompaniment. It went on for a long time, but Kit held still. The lightnings descended with more and more violence every moment until even that last faint glimpse of Daryl was washed out in their fury. Watch, Ponch said again, sounding perplexed, but somehow also amused. The air stank of ozone. The stone of the floor began to run and go molten in places, and there was nothing at the center of things anymore, but a ferocious knot of pale blue-white fire, lightning that had unnaturally endured for breath after breath, washing and burning through this one last stubborn spot it had not been able to abolish, until it faded away. There was one sense of satisfaction that was missing. The greatest, deepest darkness. The tall one, now moving down into the center to where a young boy's body should have lain, was not at all satisfied. "Gone!" the lone power cried. "Gone again! Find him!" With a vast wind-rush rustling of terror, the shadows vanished. The lone one, furious, swept its darkness about itself. They writhed like an angry cloak, wrapped in close around their master. A second later, it was gone. So, that is wild. It seems like Daryl somehow purposefully led the lone one on a wild goose chase to a decoy. I can't tell if it's that, or if he got actually caught up, but he managed to escape and leave behind something that made it look like he was still there. But either way, that's some pretty, cool magic, you know? Let's see. "Where did he go?" Kit said after a while. And I thought he meant Daryl. Oh, no, he did mean Daryl. That's right, because that's what I thought. But then Paunch replies as if he means the lone one, and Kit has to correct him. "I don't think this is the first time he's done this maneuver. He did it too quickly. I can scent the change. I can find where he goes next." It's very interesting to me that Paunch is able to scent the change and do so, apparently with more accuracy or maybe more immediacy than the lone one was able to do, because, maybe the lone one's just distracted because he's got a whole fucking, fireworks display going, and Paunch is truly focused. But, I really feel like the lone one would envy Paunch's abilities on this one. Why is he doing it? Why doesn't he get it over with? Not that he didn't look like he was having a bad time, but running away is no way to end an ordeal. Sooner or later, you have to tackle it head on before it catches you from behind when you're not looking and finishes you off. And this is when Paunch says, "I don't know. I'm not a wizard, but I know what it's like to be scared." And I wonder what he's talking about when he says this, because I'm wondering, there's something about this that feels like it triggered Paunch specifically in a way that keeps surprising Kit more than once. And I'm wondering if that's anything or if I'm just sort of making that up. So then we go into conversations, which is the first half. I did the first half up until a page break, which I'll get to. And I only have 8 minutes left, but that's okay, because not a ton happens here. It's a lot of grief stuff. But it's not plot stuff exactly yet. So first, Nita wakes up to a huge robot staring down at her. And it's got this blinding metal that shines so much that it's hard for her to see. And she realizes that it's titanium because of the colors it's throwing off. She tries to communicate, and it takes a while before she realizes that it's attempting to use the speech, but it's so broken up that it didn't even sound like words for a minute there. And eventually it puts things together. Difficulty, and then there's a bunch of crash sounds. Communications. Solve problem. Cycle insoluble. Time, no solution. Trap. Don't like that. Very curious about it, though, I won't lie. And it seems like she thinks that this thing is here for Dairine, because Dairine works with machines, and especially with stuff that involves code. So she is like, "I want to let my sister see you, but she's asleep." And I kind of wanted to be like, okay, but you were too. Wake your sister up. Like, low-key, why not, you know? But it becomes clear why not, because Nita's taking on the role of her mother here, is what we find out. Nita broke out in a sudden sweat, feeling she'd missed something important, because it begins to get up and walk away. Look, I really am sorry I can't help you. If you come back later when my sister's awake, she should be able to figure out what it is you need. Please come back later. But it was gone. And Nita found herself staring at the dark ceiling of her bedroom. The sun wasn't yet up outside, and she was still sweating and feeling stupid and wondering what on earth to make of the experience she'd just had. And she says, at least it wasn't a nightmare like the other one, which makes me think that she interprets this as being solely a dream. But I don't. Just saying. I don't think it was just a dream. I think something really actually happened there. And her dream was the easiest way to, like, get in touch with her, you know? Hence the problems with communication. She goes and wakes her dad up. And he makes this sound that he's been making before he's fully conscious that really is like this groan. And it's the only time that she really lets him like see, or that he accidentally lets her see how he's really feeling. And there's a whole thing about making coffee and how she's making it for her father now because her mother used to do it. And she's trying to get it as close to her mom's as she can. And she's not nailing it, she doesn't think. And she's almost worried about the day that she does nail it. And it's going to be like it'll be thrown into such sharp relief that her mother is gone. And that is really a beautifully like written passage. I really appreciated that. She goes back up to her room and her dad is in the shower at this point. She sits at her desk. It was hard to concentrate even in the early morning stillness. In fact, it was hard to concentrate most times, but this was something that Nita had been pushing her way through by dint of sheer stubbornness. However, her sister isn't actually doing as well. Her dad is going to have to go to the principal to talk to him. I'm assuming in a very sexist manner, to talk to them about the fact that Dairine is missing a lot of school lately and she's in trouble for it, which leads to what happens with Nita later. She is fighting with her sister, and I don't mean like argument fighting. It's more like a battle of wills that has been going around because her sister is actively like failing in a way that she hadn't been before. It's not clear that it's a fail thing, but this has not been an issue, and now it is, and this is something that grief will do. It makes you just act out in ways that you didn't get. So here's a passage that is going to be tough for me to read, but I'm going to read it. Nita leaned on the sill of the window by her desk, looking out at the bare branches of the tree out in the middle of the backyard. She could see the slow words its branches inscribed against the brightening sky and the wind, but she couldn't bring herself to care much what they said. She felt as if there was some kind of thick skin between her and the world, muffling the way she knew she ought to feel about things, and she didn't know what to do to get rid of it. What really frightened Nita were the times when she clearly perceived that separation from the world as something unnatural for her, and still didn't care if the remoteness never got better. The times she was content to just sit and stare out at the world and watch it go by. And then she looks over at these books that are piled up and notices that they're overdue. That's not like me either. I'm so obsessive about getting them back on time usually. I should take them back after school today. But taking them back just seemed like too much trouble. It could wait another day, or 2, or 3, for the little fine it would cost her. Maybe I'll feel more like it over the weekend. I really didn't need to get red like this The books aren't supposed to read me. I swear to God, though, this is such an accurate description of depression. You can see that you're not yourself, like from the outside. It's obvious. Things that you normally love that would make you feel better or get you excited just don't. And you know that it's not right, that there's something wrong, but you can't even muster up the caring that something's not right. It's more like, I know I should care. And you don't, because you're too tired to worry about it. You're too beaten down to like, and it's awful. It's the worst. And when you struggle with this on a constant basis, it's so hard to know when this is the depression or when it's just you having maybe a bad day or you being a little overtired. And that can be part of what's so frustrating, is that you feel like you're constantly gaslighting yourself. And just this whole, like, normally this thing would be of high priority to me, but I completely forgot about it. And even now that I've remembered, I can't bring myself to really fucking care. That is too much. It really, yeah, that's it. So this is when she picks up the book. What do you call it? Manual. That's the word I want. And her status is listed as optional. And she's wondering what the fuck that means and takes a little bit of offense to it. And I'm sort of assuming that means that she can choose to get involved if she wants, but it's not going to make her. Or maybe it means Kit can choose to involve her, but he may not. It's, she's not by default involved. It's up to him whether he wants to get her included in this or if he's going to try and take care of it himself. But we don't find out more about that by the end of this little section. So this is when she goes to tell Dairine to wake up. This is Dairine. Must you be so disgustingly responsible at this hour of the morning? Yes, Nita said, unimpressed by either the volume or the sentiment. Get up, Dairine. I have things to do besides deal with you all morning. Then go do them and give them my regards. Not a chance. Get up. No. And so it went for another 15 minutes or so. Nita's temper started fraying. So then she pulls out her manual and she uses this spell that she has been working on for a while, and it causes Dairine's whole bed to vanish to Pluto on a weird side of it that will make it very difficult for Dairine to go and get it. And Nita has password protected the spell and made it so that every other piece of furniture in the house will immediately transport Dairine to the classroom that she is supposed to be at that time of day. And Dairine will just be left to deal with explaining what the fuck she's doing there, which is pretty damn effective. Wow. I love this. Dairine stormed past Nita toward the bathroom, head down in a fury, refusing to give her sister so much as a glance. The severity of the effect was somewhat lessened by the dust bunnies that parted company with Dairine's pajamas along the way, floating gently in the air behind her. I wish I knew what alien force had kidnapped my sister and left this vindictive thug of a pod person in her place, because when I find out, I'm going to hunt it down and kick however many rear ends it has from here to Alpheka. And this section ends with Nita saying, enjoy your day, and went to get her book bag. So that's the end of that section. I should mention, too, that Dairine says something like, let's see, but where is it? Here it is. You ought to think about the consequences of your action insofar as they affect what Dad's going to have to say to you when school calls him at work to find out where you are. And this is a coping mechanism that a lot of kids have, where things go wrong and they try and make it easier on their parents and thus shoulder too much. And this is when Dairine tells her she's no replacement for Mom, no matter what she thinks she might be doing. And Nita has to admit to herself that she knows Dairine's just trying to get to her in a way, but also it does still hurt for her to say that. I just really appreciate the honesty of all the characters in these books most of the time. So I'm going to wrap up. I am over time, but hopefully y'all are cool with me stopping at that point. Thank you again to Tristen for commissioning this, and I'm looking forward to reading more. Thank you again, all of you, for listening, and see you soon with a new one. Until then, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.